Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome back, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and grannies and gators. It is Wednesday, October 23rd. Dry or wet. I hope you guys are having an amazing hump day. We're not going to waste a whole bunch of time. We've got a really brilliant guest coming on here today, and I want to make sure we get as much time with Brett as we can. But just to make sure that I cover the bases of the daily maintenance, Substack, guys, is where it's at. We will talk about that a little bit with our guest Brett here in a few more minutes as well. But that is where you get all the receipts, where all the details, all of the links, all of the references, all of the graphs, all of the whatever we cover on our show. You can find it there. The easiest way to get there is from whatsupcanada.org through this button here. And just on this note, before we close this subject off and we get to Brett, I've had some people asking about prepping. And so tomorrow I'm going to do kind of a bit of a different show. It's going to have two focuses. It's going to be talking about how Facebook is the existential threat and some prepping in ways that you might not be thinking of. Excuse me. And so, without further ado, it's my humble pleasure to have Mr. Brett Hawes join us today. Yeah, Brett and I are still kind of getting to know each other. And he was like, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Well, the floor is basically going to be yours. The only thing that I know is that I have a bit of a talent for when I'm in a room full of brilliant people to pick the smartest ones out and ask them to come on my show." And that was the case with Brett about a month ago or so, whatever it was. We had a chance to sit through a meeting of some serious subject matter, and Brett, some of the things you were saying there really resonated with me, and I knew I had to get you on a show. I know that you're so plugged into the reality of things, not the charade of things. And so it's finally my opportunity to introduce you to our community over here at What's Up Canada. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself as to how and why you ultimately ended up here on this crazy platform.
Oh my gosh! Wow, long story, right? So thanks so much, Wayne. I really appreciate being here and just having the chance to speak and connect with you. Boy, what a ride! What a crazy ride. So I'm going to give you the 2 minute potted bio because we could be here for a while, but I've not led a conventional life, that's for sure. People talk about career paths and stuff like that. I'm a free spirit, and I just live my life and done certain things. I would say from a career perspective, I've spent the majority of my life in the alternative health space. So I am trained, I'm certified in functional medicine, clinical and holistic nutrition, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, from energy medicine and quantum devices and herbs and homeopathy and what have you. So I've spent like my career basically running my own private practice and really helping people with a lot of chronic and complex health issues. And oftentimes when they have been either abandoned or kind of, just they've run into dead ends with the medical system. And obviously that kind of segues into some of the other things we're going to talk about today. But, where they've tried the drugs, they've tried the surgery, they've tried the specialists, and now they're looking for alternatives. That's when they're going to, look for people like myself. And so I actually stopped practicing about a year and a half ago. So I spent, a good deal of time also coaching and mentoring other clinicians and practitioners. And so I'll kind of leave that there. And then the other part of what I've done with my life is real dedicated advocacy work and activism. So I always, I have a music background. I have a sound engineering background as well from when I was young. I was in the military as well for a short while there. So all that to say, once I spread my wings and I left South Africa, which is where I was born and raised, I wanted to see the world, and I did see the world. I've been all over the show. I've spent time with Indigenous people around the world. I've been to weird and wonderful places, and that led me to Canada, where in Canada, as a young man, because I've been here for 21, 22 years now, I sort of trying to find my way, and I got this calling that I needed to help people, and I didn't quite know how that was going to happen. And I actually landed up living with the First Nations here, with a small group of the Six Nations Reserve, and through a lot of sort of spiritual work and self-development and inner work, I kind of figured my way out. But there was always this, as I traveled, I realized, like, man, like things are just not right. Like there's stuff that is not sitting right with me. this is going back 25, 30 years ago. Things are not right. And so I came to realize pretty quick that a lot of what we're told and a lot of the things that we're taught when we're growing up and that we see on media and stuff like that are just, either outright lies, or they're just not quite correct. And so in 2007, I got really thrust into the scene in terms of the health freedom sort of advocacy work, where I successfully, campaigned against Bill C-51 and 52 in Canada, which was the attack on natural health products, which we're actually currently facing right now. And
Again.
I had this. I basically had a waking vision almost, and I said, you know what, I got to get people out. And there was a few of my colleagues and my friends, and I said, we've got to do a rally. And we actually had the largest health freedom rally at Queen's Park in Canada at that time, and successfully squashed those bills. So ever since then, I've sort of really been thrust into a different kind of space with all of this. I've done work with various organizations, the NHPPA, Children's Health Defense, the Detox Project, and so on. So, yeah. So anyway, that's sort of the maybe longer than 2 minutes, but there's a lot in there. It's been quite a ride.
Well, you're right. There's a lot in there, and there's even some overlap into some of the things that led me to the place and time where we're in here right now, and part of that was not being shattered by realizing my worldview was a lie. And that
Mm,
to me, that I took that as a personal challenge then, rather than being demoralized with it, which kind of led me to a career of servitude through fire rescue, investigation, all of those kinds of things for years and years and years, to try and help and give back and serve, and here now to what I've been doing here now in the independent media space, mostly because I realized that even a rock could do better than what we were getting from the digital universe going back to 2018, 2019. And I've been so fortunate to meet so many people that have lived so much life pertinent to the times we're in, that makes them
mm,
so interesting right now. And I find a unique difference in those people is that those people are not just focused on what's wrong. They also have one step in the world of what do we do, where can we go, and that's been a big thing for me. Once I kind of realized that, wait a minute, I can't just wake people up. I have to give them at least a direction to go. I can't have all of the answers, but I can meet enough people and give people at least directions to go, and that leads to conversations like with folks like yourself that have carried so much of the load to get where we're at, but now we're kind of at the mentoring stages of helping people as we're getting to more and more things that make sense. So
yeah,
that's one of the things that attracted me about when we were talking a few weeks ago. We've got some big problems that we need to address as a country and as a society, as a species, even.
sure.
But it's there's no easy button. There's no quick
No,
fix. There's
if
no
only,
silver
right?
bullet.
If
So,
only. Oh man, I wish there was an easy button. I've been looking for it for most of my life and I haven't found it yet. So if you find it, let me know. Um, I just want to touch on a couple of things. I love, first of all, I love what you just said, because I feel like it really. I've often questioned, why am I here? Like, why am I here? Why now? Like, why have I had the experiences that I've had in terms of very different experiences? Not
yes.
just in the health space, or not just like I run my side business, which is actually my business, is a tech company, right? So we sort of like doing that, and so I don't have to be the front man for that. So my business partner is the front man. So I know a lot about technology, and I've been podcasting for a long time, and I kind of wonder, why did I do these things? Why here? Why now? And I think that the something else you said, which I just have to bring up, is we're in this time right now where I don't blame people. The last 4 years has been traumatic for everyone. It doesn't really matter what side of the aisle you're on or what your beliefs are. And I think that I have a lot of sympathy for people who um, the COVID pandemic was foisted upon them, and they're
Yep.
suddenly now going, hang on a minute, like the things that we were told. And if I look in that rearview mirror now, like, boy, like there's some things that are just not adding up. Like there's some lies there. And so I don't blame those people for, as they're waking up and sort of going like, holy smokes, like I'm trying to put myself in their shoes to go like, what does that feel like to have your entire worldview shattered? And not just that, you're confronted with challenging your core beliefs, which is not an easy thing to, to come to terms with. And so, for me, 25 years ago, like I started looking into a lot of this stuff. I mean, I was talking when I was a youngster, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, one day, I mean, we were talking like they're gonna microchip us and all this sort of stuff. And here we're having like more serious conversations about that nowadays. But I didn't know at the time when we were just young, we were kind of goofing around. But all those experiences have led us to this point now. And I look at where we're at right now, and people like myself, people like yourself, I was making so much noise, even prior to the pandemic. Like I was booted off Facebook in 2018. I mean, so that gives you some kind of clue. So by the time the pandemic rolled around, I doubled down, I went harder, and they said to me like, no one's going to see your stuff, so don't go looking for me on Facebook. I'm there. I don't do anything on Facebook. But the point is, when you're at the tip of the spear, sometimes, it's very difficult because you can see things that other people don't see. And when you've been looking at the 20, 30, 40 and longer on ramp to where we are today, you can kind of piece things together a little bit better. So you sort of say, hey, this is what's coming down the road. And you've got a whole bunch of people that have no clue what you're talking about because they're sitting in the back of the bus while you're at the front of the bus. But as time goes by and the bus moves further down the road, the people in the back are now where you were at the front, and they kind of like slowly, collectively, we go, oh, okay, I kind of see what you're talking about. So, I don't get trolled as much these days anymore, which is kind of interesting because I got
Right?
absolutely destroyed in the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, it was like I had to take a break. I literally took a break for like a year, and I was like, I just got to, gather myself. But what I've come to realize is that when you're at that position, and I'm doing some crazy podcasts right now with very cutting edge researchers and scientists and whatnot, and we need to hold space for the other people. Like that's where we're at. We're in the eye of the storm. We're in the middle of a hurricane right now, and other people are getting really swept up in that hurricane. And it's up to us, the people that kind of know what's going on. Maybe we don't have it all figured out, but the people that know what's going on is just be there for the people when they come over, because no one else is going back the other way. Let me just tell you that.
Exactly.
No one
Right?
else is waking up and going, oh my gosh, you know what? We had it all wrong. Pandemic response was amazing. Justin Trudeau's an awesome guy. And, geez, like, what was I thinking? No one is thinking like that. Everyone is going, holy smokes, I'm waking up. Things are not right. Where are my people? And so we need to be those people that are in the eye of the storm, so to speak, and welcome our people. Because look, there's no shortage of division in this world. There's no shortage of division. I mean, this is the first rule of war is divide and conquer. And so I've been very careful to not try and ostracize other people. Like you will not hear me publicly ever call someone a sheeple. I have no judgment if you do call people that, but I try not to do that because I don't find it's useful. You,
It,
you know,
it's the same to me with these terms like blue blood. That's so insulting to the people that were coerced or duped. I have no time and space for that. It's very much about, if we want to win this, we have to remember our humanity. There's a bazillion things that we can find to argue and fight about, but some very key things that we need to agree upon right now. And the fastest way to figuring out the path to agreeing with somebody or having somebody agree with you is to meet them where they're at. Our ears
totally.
are our best weapons. And when you know the information well enough and you can listen to the people, and this is that, having that time and space for them, take 5 minutes and listen to what their pain points are, what their trauma is, what they're actually suffering. And they will show you a path where you can leave the nuggets for them to have the discovery that means that they will join your side of the discussion more, with less trepidation, with less fear, with less anxiety. We're so good at, through our lashing out through our own levels of frustration and not understanding that, and it's become acceptable in our society to apparently do that. There's keyboard
Hmm.
bravery, whatever it is, a disconnect from humanity, desperation, frustration, so many of those things. Those are the enemies of us collectively, getting an opportunity to resist things in meaningful ways, which is, I think, kind of where we need to take a breath and collectively, take a look around and do a buddy check on everybody. Are we
Yeah.
okay? And you can't fake your way forever through pretending like you're okay when
No.
society is absolutely collapsing around us. Absolutely. But we can live
Yeah.
in hopelessness or hopefulness. And that's a choice, and it will get you very different results. I firmly believe that. So I see all of this as an opportunity. This insanity is unsustainable. That is
Hmm.
is science. I'm just a northern swamp donkey, uneducated, but I know that insanity is unsustainable. And so the sooner we get our poop in a group, and just remember where we're at and
Yeah.
what actually is meaningful, we have a path through this, and it doesn't come from violence or anger or rage or lashing out or taking notes. That's just my thoughts on a lot of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll share a quick story from my military days. So growing up in South Africa, I lived through the apartheid era. So I watched the sort of peak of that as a child, and then I watched Nelson Mandela get out of prison and become the president, and the powers that be changed and everything like that. And so suddenly, this was the first year that all of the opposing forces, the Umkhonto we Sizwe, all these forces that had been fighting against one another. You got to remember, there's hundreds of years of brainwashing and whatnot that's been going on all sides. And suddenly, I find myself in the dorm, and all of us are together, right? So you can imagine what went down. I mean, we're all 18, piss and vinegar, ready to rumble, and here we are. Suddenly, lots of tension, lots of fighting, lots of this and that. But pretty quickly, we realized that, hey, we're all in this together. And that wasn't like a catchphrase or anything like we've heard over the last while. That was genuinely like, if we didn't band together and we didn't pull our weight, the POs and the drill sergeants were just going to keep you on that beach, and they would just keep hammering you all day long. They didn't care, right? And so what that opened the door to was not just that we had to work together as a team, but it actually kind of forced you to just listen to people and to talk to people. And you started to realize pretty quick, like, hey, man, we actually have a lot in common here. And so some of those people went on to be very good friends. Like, we all became good friends over the while. It wasn't just that we were in the barracks and we were just trying to get along and make it work. We actually became buddies. And so, that was a real eye-opening moment for me back in my youth, because I look at that now and I think those types of experiences help me to relate to all kinds of people, whether I can go toe to toe with lawyers, with scientists, with doctors. I got one of my best friends is a truck driver. I've done stonemasonry. So like, I feel like I can relate to a lot of people. But to your point, I think that what we've lost is we've lost the ability to see how much more in common we actually have. And we focus so much on our differences. And that is, people need to start realizing very quickly here that the war is not black versus white, gay versus straight, woman versus men, or anything like that. The war that is being waged upon us is a war that has been thrust upon us by the political class, by the elite class, and the billionaire class. That is the war, and it's on humanity. That's where we're at. So the sooner that humanity starts banding together and realizing, hang on a second, it's these guys that are actually coming after us. There's 8 billion of us, and this is what we were talking about in Geneva in June. It was literally called, we are the 8 billion. And that's been the campaign. So we just need to start stepping back into our power and kind of realizing, like, hang on a second, your neighbor, no matter what their beliefs are or where they come from, is not actually really the problem. It's again, that's the first rule of war, right? It's that divide and conquer, and just look around, because every single socio-political issue, if you want to get into identity politics, all these types of things, every single thing is about putting people into two camps and getting
Yep.
them to fight against one another. Pick an issue, right? Doesn't matter what it is, that's the rule. And that's why we're so divided.
Everything has been weaponized as a wedge issue to start. Every time there's something that we start to get an agreement upon, they will find manufacture, create an opportunity to implement or stick in there something that will divide us yet again. And we live in a world where we're kind of, I guess, socially trained to compartmentalize. When we meet people, the first thing is, what do you do, where are you from? And so we kind of start to compartmentalize. So when it comes to then the next step of talking about issues of any kind,
Yeah.
we take the same process of compartmentalizing. And then it becomes very tribal from there. And at the end of the day, we're all going to end up in the same graveyards together. And
Pretty
how we
much.
get there, though, is the part that's up for discussion. And you mentioned the
Yeah.
bus earlier. I have to, it makes me smile, not because of what you mentioned, but Celtic Canuck uses this analogy about our political system, where it's just a bunch of lunatics fighting over the steering wheel of the school bus, and we're all locked in the trunk, right? And this is exactly where we find ourselves, is trying to fight our way to the front of the bus, while the lunatics are fighting over who gets to drive it off the cliff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Well, we're certainly there. I mean, I know some people might not appreciate this, but I really don't have a lot of faith in politics, yeah, or politricks, as I've called it for most of my life. Where you're looking now. I have my finger on the trigger with a podcast, which is going to be very unusual for me because I'm literally posting someone else's video. But it's some folks that I know from Europe that just made an excellent video of both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, right? And they sort of trace things back, and they go back in time, and it's like, where do these people come from? Is there a deep state? Like, what's really going on? And when you look at these types of things, I mean, I've always said this: it's like politics is like WrestleMania, right? Everyone's going to beat the crap out of each other in the ring, and they're all going for beers afterwards, and that's politics in a nutshell. So this idea that we actually have these opposing forces, and they're really trying to rally on our best behalf and all that sort of stuff. Like, I feel like, in some ways, I kind of wonder, have we ever really had a democracy? I don't know. I don't know that for sure. But what that means is that as we come into this time now, and again, I said some people might not appreciate me saying that, I just think that looking to the next leader, looking to something outside of ourselves to try and come and save the day, I think that ship has sailed a really long time ago. And what's the reason why people are feeling so disheartened and kind of like they've lost so much trust in our institutions and our leaders is because anyone who's been around long enough and just paid attention, it's always the campaign slogans, the promises, but nothing ever really changes. And as we're witnessing right now, in fact, they actually get a lot worse. And so, the vacuuming up of money over the pandemic, I mean, the printing of money, first of all, but we've literally seen one of the biggest transfers of wealth into the upper, the billionaire class and whatever, even the politicians. I mean, I don't know how they've 10x or 100x their wealth in the last 5 years, but on a $200,000 or $300,000 salary, I'm not quite sure how that happens. But the point is, I think what's becoming painfully obvious for a lot of people is that the political class is actually being captured. The question is, who are they captured by? And I think that we're starting to see that they are more beholden to the corporations than they are to the people. And
well,
yeah. So anyway, I'll kind of stop there.
You don't have to worry about this community here. You can go a lot deeper into the weeds than that, and they are fully educated on
Perfect.
that. We're fully cognizant that pretty much what we have is a capture of corporations through different syndicates and
Yeah.
mafias that are competing within all of our structures and industry. And infrastructure in our country. It's just a giant competition between criminal syndicates at this point. And
Yeah.
what they're using in the theater of politics is comes from unelected foreign entities that were established a long time ago under entirely different pretenses than what we're seeing here today. But it's they've fully taken advantage of the fact that it's basic human nature to not learn the lesson until the price we pay is high enough.
Yeah.
And never again wasn't a high enough price in 1945. They just, just like all other communist, fascist, Marxist ideas, they think that they'll get it right next time. Along comes technology. And every time there's an evolution in technology, we have a lurch of one of these identities or ideologies trying to take advantage and conquer the world through whatever technology they're leveraging until there's parity. And then all of a sudden people don't want to fight anymore. And we have a short period of peace, and the internet provided a lot of that. And now we're getting a lot closer to that parity point. They're getting extremely concerned in these faraway lands that issue their edicts through no elected representation, i.e., Geneva and New York and Davos, and what we're familiar here with. We call it the hashtag WEF Fourth Reich.
Yeah.
Under Eric Klaus, and so this is kind of where we see things coming apart here now. And I think that we have an opportunity here coming out, and this is where we met when the point was Bill C-293. And I have two different feelings on this, and I'd like your thoughts on that. One is finally something that is going to hurt the people bad enough that they're going to realize that this whole charade has to come apart, or it's an opportunity for us to get ahead of this and realize what they actually have in plan for us, and to motivate ourselves into pulling an Iceland.
Yeah. Well, so a lot to unpack there. I'm not going to get into Marxism and communism because I'm going to be here for a really long time. So suffice to say that that what's
I forgot to send out the memo that Wayne isn't an easy show, and you're probably going to have to come back.
I might have to do that, yeah, because again, like we have an hour, so I have a lot to say on that. However, I think one thing I want to just mention, because I think it's very relative to what's going on today, is what we've gone through is we've actually gone through a period of multi-generational ideological subversion.
Yes.
And this is really, people talk about communism and Marxism, and they're like, well, how's it going to be communist, right? You think the state's going to own everything? And it's like,
fit into any one specific box. It's a giant chimera we've never seen before.
Right, and that's exactly it. So when you think of communism, air quotes, I think what a lot of people do is they go, oh, well, it's going to be like Stalin, it's going to be. No, it's not what it's going to be like, because we have technology now. So what it's actually going to be is more of a sort of techno-fascist type of communism because of the digital component, right? But the problem is that you have the ideological subversion, right? And that is really... if you listen to Yuri Bezmenov, I think is his name.
Love
he's
him.
an
Yes.
ex-KGB. Yeah, yep. Listen to some of his lectures, and he'll tell you that after 3 generations, there ain't no coming back. So the challenge we have before us now is not so much the apparatus. I think a bigger piece is actually the ideology, because prior to the last 3 generations, right? So let's just say after World War II, a little bit after that, people sort of came in, and we've had relative peace and prosperity for the last 70 years, give or take. But that's not really the default position of society. There's always been tension. There's always been someone's going to try and invade my land. I got to worry about food. Someone's going to try and kill me, or it's a wild animal or whatever. So we're not actually, this whole peace and prosperity type of era. What it's really done is it's actually really softened people. But more importantly, it's actually done a great job at erasing history. And so people don't actually understand history. They don't know what's happened. And if you read Marx, if you read Engels, if you read Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and then you start to see what the United Nations is talking about, what you're going to find is the United Nations is actually founded on Marxist principles and ideology. plain and simple, so go and listen to Dennis Meadows, and he was one of the main guys who sort of really shaped the United Nations policy. And he wrote a book, Limits to Growth, I think in 1972. And in Limits to Growth, he basically says straight up, he's like, listen, there's too many people on the planet. If we want to have some kind of equilibrium and we all want to live in harmony and Shambhala, then what we need to take that down to 1 billion people. And the only way you do that, right? So there's 1 billion people. I don't know what his methods are, but here's what he said. He said, if you cannot get the population down, you will need a scientific dictatorship. That's what he said. You will need a science-based dictatorship. That is where we're at right now, all right? A science and technology dictatorship. But the problem is, if you haven't changed the thinking of the people, they will gladly accept that, because look at what's going on right now. Mass disruption, mass chaos. There must come order from chaos. And who's going to provide that order, right? The globalists will provide that order. So this is kind of, the backdrop that we're working on, which is really important. So yes, we can talk about C63, we can talk about 293, C47, all these things that are going on in Canada. But the problem I have is it's the good percentage of Canadians, and the world by extension, that can't wrap their head around the idea that our authorities, the people that are supposed to be in charge of looking after us, I say that very pedantically, I guess, actually are not doing that, in fact, quite the opposite. So, to come to 293, all right, I've spent a lot of time digging into the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and I spent a lot of time, I've interviewed James Rogowski, I don't know how many times. Yeah. We've done a lot of work together, but I started talking about the international health regulations probably almost 2 years ago now. And so I started to see, they already had the IHR from 2005. They then brought that up during the pandemic to say, hey, you know what, we need to make these amendments because, wow, we just had a big scary pandemic, and boy, we better be better prepared for next time, right? And boy, the changes that they brought in were just absolutely mind-blowing. And so that's when we jumped on it, right? So people like myself, like James, other folks, we started jumping on this and saying, hey, hang on, we got to be on this. This cannot go through. And so that's what prompted me to go to Geneva with a group of people. I think Robert Malone was there, Brett Weinstein, a whole, Del Bigtree, a bunch of people. Not to name drop, but it was quite the event, because people flew in from all over the world. Steve Kirsch was there, Jessica Rose. So we're all there, and here we are standing outside the United Nations, and we're like, hell no, hell no to the IHR amendments. We are the people, we're taking back our power, and we will not stand for this. And lo and behold, while we're celebrating after the rally on Saturday night, they signed the IHR amendments. Okay. Tedros was literally in the other room from the summit that we had. So, now the pandemic treaty sort of being rekindled and revived. But here's the thing, and this is what I'm getting at. For months, I sat there and I said to James one day, I said, James, where's the paper trail, man? I said, there's got to be a paper trail. He said, there's no paper trail because these are ideas. He said, these are ideas. So when they go to Davos, when they all hang out, it's just a sharing of ideas. There's no paper trail, and they all go off and they all kind of do their thing, right? Well, now what we have in the way of C293, because I've been looking for this, and I said, how are these guys going to install the World Health Organization, IHR pandemic treaty, and really what it is the One Health Initiative? How are they going to install this into Canada and bypass national sovereignty? Because I sat with 8 weeks, I sat with a group of lawyers from around the world. Don't ask me how I got to moderate those meetings, but I was just there, just me, not a lawyer. And we had politicians, we had lawyers, and we sat down for 8 weeks and we said, right, we got to hammer this thing out and figure out what the hell is going on with these IHR amendments. And national sovereignty was a topic of discussion for 3 weeks. And what it turned out that those recommendations for the IHR and the pandemic treaty and whatever, our government still has to implement those recommendations.
Yes.
So at that time, national sovereignty was never actually under question. I got that wrong. I learned from the lawyers that, okay, I need to change my position on that. But here's the thing. Now with C293, what we've uncovered is that our public health agencies have actually been infiltrated for more than 20 years through something called the Pan American Health Organization, right? So how many of your listeners, I can't see your chat or anything, but how many people actually knew that the Pan American Health Organization even existed? I can tell
Um,
you probably none. Probably none, because not many
we
people have heard about it. But
we did do a show on them a couple of years back now.
okay,
So I've been kind of at the tip of the spear on a lot of this stuff
yeah,
too.
good, good.
Dr. Bridle, his first public interview was on this platform, and then I went on to do 50 different interviews. I was the provided all of the media for the Canadian COVID Care Alliance when they first launched, which
Perfect.
turned into the World Council for Health. I helped with
Yeah,
those
yeah.
guys. So yeah, this community is really had a opportunity to
Awesome.
access a ton of resources when it comes to this
So
kind of
let me
stuff.
just wrap that up, and then we can carry on. You know,
Sure.
so with 293, I think the big thing to be aware of is that what we've uncovered now is we've uncovered that through the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, we actually have our government agencies, right? So Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, other bureaucracies are all tethered to PAHO. And so basically, you know, everyone said, oh no, the World Health Organization's not telling the government what to do, but they kind of are, because they're telling PAHO what to do. And we are now beholden to all of the policies from PAHO. Now, what C293 does is C293 brings that into law in Canada. That's what people really need to know. And I hate to say it, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but they actually started second reading in the Senate today, just so
Yeah,
people know. So
I
second, you know, which you know, and these days they're ramming through bills like no one's business. So,
what
you know,
what
we'll see.
what people what's going to actually clue people in on this is, and they love to do this is wash rinse repeat behavior for these infiltrators. I'm not going to let go of that here. I'm going to circle back to that here in just a second. But the instant that passes and hits royal assent, what ends up happening is the checks start getting written to the tunes of trillions of dollars to line up the agencies, the people,
Hmm.
the staff, to do all of the studies, all of their gender studies and environmental studies and DEI studies. So immediately what happens is the wealth extraction begins all over again. And the instant they implement any kind of environmental pandemic threat or emergency, they have instant authority to do whatever they really desire. So this is kind of where we're at, you know, the edge of the cliff that we're kind of really
Yeah,
falling over. But I wanted
yeah.
to just touch on something. You know, when you mentioned going back in the infiltration, the ideological infiltration that's been going on here. I
Mm-hmm.
you know, we know here that given the what happened post World War II, all of the professors in the Frankfurt schools were brought over here, with a whole lot of people that were professional ideological subverters, and this is so entrenched through the academia and the infrastructure that have facilitated all of this through the syndicates of now many different factions that are all, you know, at the feeding off of the corruption of the wealth extraction. And now we
Mm-hmm.
have the political class being the largest consumers of the wealth extraction through the pharma industry, which has been the Trojan horse of commerce
Yep.
through our captured governments. And for me, I'm a strong advocate of the word coup. Canada is experiencing a real live coup here right now. The World
Yep.
Economic Forum has dropped parachuted Mark Carney in here as the mafia fixer to clean up the mess the young global brats have been making, and to save the day on his big great white horse and ram this bill C293 and whatever else they can through before the pyramid topples. So that's kind of
Yeah.
to speed us up to, I think, where we're at right here in, you know, in this moment. How far off do you
Yeah.
think I am, Brett?
No, I think you're pretty bang on. You know, again, like I was saying about, I know I brought Donald Trump and Kamala in as you know, as case study one, but I think go and have a look at Chrystia Freeland, go and have a look at Jagmeet Singh, go and have a look at Trudeau, go and have a look at Carney. I mean, these guys are all graduates of the Young Global Shapers or whatever they're called. You know what I mean?
And
So it's like
Elizabeth May professing she takes her orders from none other than Palestine. Like,
yeah,
she's not even
well,
Canadian.
so this is the thing, right? So I think when we come back to this idea of national sovereignty, like it's not so much like I think we also need to think about the people who are making the decisions for us, right? So forget about the legal apparatus. The people that are making the decisions for us, are they making decisions based on the will of the people, or are they serving someone else? And I think it's becoming clearly obvious that they're serving other people. Yeah, I mean, holy smokes! You got Canadian food banks have tripled, the numbers that they're serving now in just like 2 years. You got 25% of Canadians that are food insecure. And we know cost of living. I don't need to rehash all the problems, but we can all see that because everyone is kind of living that experience. You know what I mean? Which sort of like brings us to this whole point where the one thing that I kind of am hopeful for right now is they try to turf Trudeau out today, I think, and he basically didn't walk. And so people are sort of going, I wonder if he's going to prorogue, which has pros and cons. But one of the big pros is that the bills will all get thrown out and they have to start over. So it'll buy us some time. I mean, it's not perfect, but let's see what happens on that front. Yeah, it also it brings into focus this other. I'm just conscious of our time as well, and I think what's happening in communities like yours, in ours, because I'm sure I know some people in your community and vice versa, is that people talk about freedom, right? So we talk about freedom, and it's like with freedom comes great responsibility, because freedom is not just about I need someone else to take over the steering wheel and then we can all go and sit and have a Labatt Blue on the dock and kind of just kick our feet up. Freedom freedom was won, freedom was fought for, and freedom we need to be vigilant in terms of how we hold on to that. You know what I mean? And part of where we're coming to, I think, is that there's a great sense of personal responsibility. When you look at the word triumph, for example, people think of triumph. They think of, you'll hear terms like spiritual wars and, there's a war. And so the idea of triumph, typically, they think it's these opposing forces that are kind of clashing together and, the good guys are just going to beat the snot out of the bad guys and we're all going to win. And I don't think that that's what's going on here. I think what's actually happening is when you look at the word triumph means that we need to become something bigger than ourselves. We need to become a higher version of ourselves. And we're there. I think we're there because, like you've said, at the top of the show here, you're talking about prepping. We've got different groups we've got medical pods. We've got people that are doing schooling in our community. We've got, preppers. We've got people growing food. Like we're actually doing a food co-op now. We're sort of like figuring out how, and it's not just any old food co-op. We've got the technology that we're using is actually offline, but it's online, so it's this sort of like decentralized software platform for managing co-ops. And so the idea is, that it's not a co-op for every Tom, Dick, and Harry at the farmer's market. It's people that realize what's going on and say, hey, listen, there's a line in the sand, and come hell or high water, I'm not going to go through the gates. I'm not going to comply. I'm not going to do what they tell me. There needs to be alternatives. You can't just blindly dig your heels in and go, screw you guys, and then, okay, well, now what? Because you're going to starve, you know what I mean? So we need to think about these things in a different way. And I think that there's this sort of, I get it, I'm aggressive by nature in many senses. I've got that sort of like that bravado, but as I've gotten older, that's kind of tempered down a little bit, and I have to sort of like pull myself
gets a
back.
little bit of temperament.
Yeah, but you gotta keep your feet on the ground. You know what I mean? Because and you got to think a little bit, think through some of these things. And I certainly don't have all the answers. I mean, I can tell you right now, I don't have it all figured out. But I think what we're being called to do is we're being called to self-organize, and we're being called to build those communities where to try and say, oh my gosh, we're going to have this like decentralized food system that runs parallel to the Canadian food system is just magical thinking. I mean, it's not going to work like that. It needs to be decentralized. It needs to be community focused. And that same principle goes for everything else, whether it be healthcare, food, these types of things. So That's, I think that's where we're at, and I don't know. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong, or if I'm
Absolutely
off track
not.
at all.
A short little story. At the height of COVID, I was in on Easter Sunday in the grubbiest welding barn you could imagine, with 450 some odd Mennonites, Hunterites, and locals gathered on
Mm,
what they could do to circumvent the system and create alternative means. And that is, something that inspires me to realize that, Buckminster Fuller said it too. You don't beat the system from fighting within it. You recreate something and make it irrelevant, but that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a minute, and people
no.
need to get a reality check on what the word prepper means and prepping means. And that's kind of what we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at tomorrow night. It's not, do you have your 15 things in your go bag so you can run out into the forest and die of starvation in 2 weeks, rather than one. And
Yeah,
so I think we need to calm things down. Societies have risen, dynasties have risen, and they have collapsed throughout the repeat of history. And here right now we're at a point where humanity is taking back control of what makes common sense. We're seeing more of a consensus internationally where we can speak freely still. Where we can't, we are adapting and improvising and overcoming and
hmm,
recreating and finding alternatives. We're already doing some of that, but understanding that, to me, the thing is, localism is 100% cure, safe and effective for
yeah,
globalism, and understanding that the more we can relate and realize in many different nations that it's the same ideology coming from the same man behind the curtain,
hmm,
to and rise against that. And I think that's what we're seeing, internationally and abroad, maybe triggered by Canadians in the original convoy. But that was what it was, and we can't recapture that lightning in a bottle and do that
yeah,
again. What we need to do is again, meet people where they're at, get ourselves to some form of community regrowth, restructuring, and we're going to be okay. But it's not going to get, it's going to get worse before it gets easier, because as the tower collapses, there's going to be a lot of damage that's going to come through all of that.
yeah,
But there's a lot. It's not nearly as bad within our own control as we might tend to feel like it is.
yeah. Well, I think, look, social media unfortunately amplifies everything, right? So,
Yeah.
just go spend enough time on Twitter if you have low blood pressure, and your blood pressure will be up in no time. So, and I say that tongue in cheek, but there are
True
things. Look,
story.
look,
It's
there's
happened.
bad things. There's bad things that are going on. Like, we can't stick our head in the sand, because you got the spiritual folks that are trying to bypass everything. It's like, if I just sit on the beach and meditate and put my affirmations up there, and just do this and do nothing, and I'm not a participant, then everything's going to be fine. And it's like, it doesn't really work like that either. We are in this, we are participants in it, we need to embrace that. And I think that when you look out into the world, it's very easy to go, oh my gosh, like, this is all happening today, and holy smokes, I hope we make it till 5 o'clock. And and there's a lot of people like that. I mean, I have friends like that, where they'll send me stuff and it's like, that's it. I mean, you should just leave the country right now, like pack your bags and go. And it's like, when people say that type of stuff enough times, you start to go, okay, we need to have a bit more of a metered kind of response. Not, and I'm not trying to be cavalier about that, or dismiss anything, but I think what I see happening out there is a very high degree of burnout with people. And I said a long time ago, I said, the struggles that we're coming into now are multi-year struggles, and you're no good to anyone. You're no good to your family, to your children, or anything like that if you're burnt out and stressed out. And just know that nothing catastrophic is going to happen in an instant. It's a slow boil. I mean, that's actually how they're getting away with this stuff, is it's a slow boil. If they did it quickly, everyone would latch on. Everyone would know the jig is up. So they're doing it slowly. I don't want to say that we don't have time. I mean, I think there is a massive sense of urgency, but I think we don't need to throw ourselves under the bus and become that kind of martyr, in order to save the day. Because how many of us? I mean, I'm guilty of that. Like, I kind of burnt myself out in the pandemic. I went hard on the podcasting. I was going for broke, and got eviscerated on social media, like had my own mental health problems, and I had to just take a break. And so I think it's okay to take a break. It's important to take a break, and just self-preservation is really huge right now. You talk about prepping. It's not just about prepping physically, it's about prepping emotionally and mentally too. You got to keep centered. Otherwise you're going to get destroyed.
That tour I was on through that time frame was trying to encourage people. I know Canadians, the underground Canadians, it's in our nature, it's in our history. We know to be prepared for bad things to happen, whether these kinds of things. So it's kind of in our culture already. So I've never really focused on that personal preparation. I was always encouraging people, if to prepare our communities.
Yeah.
We have to get away from this isolationism. We need isolationism as a nation, I think, right now.
Sure.
Sever all of those bonds with these unelected foreign entities, that have infiltrated, or shall I say, penetrated the cabinets. But the surest thing through this is, through, back to the community. Your resources in your community. It's not nearly as drastic as what it is. We see these things happening all the time. Anytime there's a crisis, it's never the government that comes and saves the day. It's the
Ever.
people.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
if we get ahead of that, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to live hopefully, with hope rather than despair. And and maybe that's just wishful thinking, but I think that that's kind of the only way we are gonna, keep our souls moving forward through this, and staying connected to humanity.
Yeah. Well, a couple of uh, the spiritual teachings, I guess, if you want to call them that. Fear. Fear is very real. And fear is not a bad thing. Fear is what's kept humanity alive for all these eons. So healthy fear, rational fear, is not a bad thing. If someone's coming to beat you up,
Ration.
like you better step up and do something, or run away, or do something. So that's fine. But fear starts to dissipate more when you kind of realize that, hey, you know what? What's happening here right now is pretty well just a dream. You know what I mean? Like, we are souls having a physical experience, and we will continue on after this. And once you sort of like sit with that for long enough, you kind of realize, like, hey man, why am I doing this? Like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Why am I relentless in this pursuit, and I just can't give it up? It's because you start working for other people and not just yourself. In fact, I don't really do any of the stuff for myself, right? I think about the generations to come. I think about my children. I think about what kind of future would I like to leave for them. And to say that, you know what, I stood on the right side of history. I did what I can, even though I got taken to the cleaners. It doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, the one thing that's guaranteed is we're all going to die. End of conversation. There's nothing else that's guaranteed in this life. And so when you think about bravery, people talk about bravery and courage and these types of things. In the Shambhala tradition, which is an Eastern tradition, bravery actually means, right, the courage to be yourself. What an interesting concept, right? So bravery is the courage to be yourself. And what does it mean to be yourself? It means that you stand up for your beliefs, right? It means that you stand up for what's right, and you don't care about what other people think or the consequences of that. And I get that, like, people have jobs and livelihoods and stuff, I get that. But there's many different ways that you can stand up for your beliefs, and you can stick to your guns, right? It doesn't have to be through podcasting or live streams or whatever. Many other ways that you can do that. And if everyone could find the courage and the bravery to be themselves, boy, the tide would turn, like, big time, Because right now what I see is a whole bunch of people hiding away, trying to stick their head in the sand, pretending like this is not going on. And
The
it's
alligator's
happening,
going to eat them last.
yeah. Well, if your head's in the sand, you might get taken out first. I'm not sure.
Well,
That's open for debate.
but that's the mindset. If they don't stick their head above the wall, they might, if they're lucky, outlast whatever's out there. But I think that, I think most of us realize that we're beyond that. This is all encompassing of our nations and our societies, and
Yeah.
that local our local municipalities is the intervention point, because one of the
Yeah.
things you said there earlier is all of these ideologies come from these unelected entities in faraway places, and then they have their sponsored meat muppets or swamp zombies that are in offices that have been infiltrated, placed, whatever the case might be. But every last bit of it is dependent on the municipal implementation and to build it up from there. The orders and the decrees is all that comes from on high. And this is where they are most afraid of people like us that are bringing communities together with accurate information that's helpful, and there's something to go, rather than just getting angry and frustrated and looking to do dangerous things in my mind. So this is where
Yeah.
we have an opportunity to sort some of the bazillion things that we can pick or choose in the moment to argue or fight about, or find a couple of things that will help us in a path. And for me, one of the big understandings with this was I don't remember the gentleman, but the quote is, if we have failed to deliver justice, without justice there can be no future. And that's how where we kind of have to realize, what is it that we're working for, more specifically.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
kind of
the way. Yeah. Sorry.
my
Yeah.
take. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in the way to have that, the way to move forward in society, if you just have a look at what they're doing, why do we have all of these hate speech bills and censorship bills and all that sort of stuff? Because they don't actually want us talking to one another, and they don't want us broadcasting this information, because they know that if this kind of information gets out and people start tuning in, they're going to wake up and they're going to realize that they're actually empowered. And so, we're at that point now where the progress here is increased dialogue and increased conversation, not decreased. And so as we talk more, we connect more. Look, I'm sitting here talking to you, right? Our paths might never have crossed 10
Absolutely.
years ago, like might never have crossed. I mean, I've met people from all walks of life, from all disciplines, from all races, creeds, whatever. And I look at them sometimes and I'm like, holy smokes, how awesome is this? But it's interesting how these types of trauma, if you will, how it brings people together in certain ways.
Oh, that's one of my trigger words, trauma. We have the privilege of having one of the best trauma practitioner experts in the planet as a friend of the platform here. And we one of the things that we agree upon is recognizing trauma. The people that make it through the other side come out with a sense of cause and purpose that is unstoppable, and those are the
Yeah.
people that are changing the world. They feel free to be themselves, and they will always have that here, hold my beer mentality, and
Love it. Love
carry
it.
on. So
Yeah.
on that note, I want to give your Substack and your podcast a quick plug before I let you go. I want to be grateful for the time you found to join us here tonight, Brett. This is Brett's Substack, of course. Everything will be included in the notes in my Substack tomorrow, and you'll probably find it in the show notes wherever you're tuning in from here tonight. So you mentioned something about something special coming up that you're working on. Give us an idea, or the what do they call that?
I'm going to give you the Coles notes, right? There's a lot of cool stuff that I'm working on, but one of the things that I'm working on is I'm planning. I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but I'm planning to redo the virology control studies that Jamie Andrews has done. We've kind of become friends, but now I have scientist friends who can help me with that, to basically say, hey, the things that we're looking at in a petri dish, are these things viruses or what are they, right? And so if we can replicate Stefan Lanka's work and kind of move that ball forward. The other thing is actually building a solid case. So I have a friend of mine who I met in Geneva, Adrian McRae, who's he's the counselor for Port Hedland in Australia. He basically just bought the work of Dr. Speaker, who was on my podcast this last week, of DNA contamination. He took that to the town council, and they voted 5-2 to basically say all COVID shots must be stopped because of DNA contamination. And that has subsequently been, basically permeated through all of the councils, and that's going up to the upper echelon. So I'm building a case here in Canada. I've got Dr. I don't think she's a doctor, but Regina Wattil, who did Fistman's Fraud. Yeah, so that's coming out tomorrow. Dr. David Speaker, who did the DNA contamination, came out last week. I've done a lot on virology and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of building a case where we can take it to the town councils here in Canada and see if we can replicate some of the things they've done in Australia.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure if you caught the news today about what was it, the Holland and their beef with Mr.
Yeah,
Bill Gates.
I
He's
did. Yeah.
not skating. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that? Before I
Yeah.
let you go, it's got to be the best news of the day that I've seen come through.
It is. So for people who don't know the case, again, I'm privy to be in some pretty cool WhatsApp and Signal groups and whatnot, and so I got that a couple of days ago. The person who's actually involved in the case shared it, and of course I'm like, let's do a show, and she's like, well, time zones and whatever else. I'm like, oh, who cares? So anyway, what people need to know is that there were 7 plaintiffs who basically went to the Dutch courts and said, hey, there were torturous acts, is what they called it in air quotes.
Yep.
And those were perpetrated by not just Bill Gates. There's others as well. Rutte, who's the PM at the time, and then also Bourla, I think is his name, who's the Moderna
Anthony
guy.
Bourla,
Yeah.
Mark Rutte, now
Yeah.
the head of
So anyway,
NATO.
yeah. So all of them were actually on the lawsuit, and basically what happened was the Dutch court. The contention there was basically, can Bill Gates be tried in a foreign court because he's an American citizen? The Dutch court basically said, yes, you can stand trial here. So basically, where it's at now is he will stand trial in the Dutch court, but for now, I don't want anyone to get like super hopeful here. He's had to pay their court fees and whatever, which is about the equivalent of 2,000 euros. So it's not really much for him, but hopefully it sets a precedent whereby in other countries it can also be tried for these crimes against humanity.
With the things like the European Freedom Alliance and some of those things that are growing over there, I think those kinds of precedents are just beginning, my friend.
Critical, yeah, and that's why I'm doing some of the stuff I'm doing, because it's like all about precedents. You know, if you can set that precedent, you know, Cullen MacDonald, who was on my podcast a few weeks ago, you know, he got acquitted of all of his charges for his protests during the pandemic. So again, that sets a precedent where if we want to get out into the street and we want to, you know, voice our opposition and our disdain with the government and their policies, well, we have a case to rest on now, where you know, they can't arrest you for nuisance.
Cullen's a friend of mine, going back to the early days of the street protests in Toronto.
Yeah.
So I was pretty excited to see that. Thank you so much for
There's
coming
lots of
on here,
wins.
Brett.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Wayne. We'll have to do it again sometime, and we'll pick some
Absolutely.
topics and dive deeper. Yeah, for sure. I would love that.
I think we just kind of tiptoed through the tulips on so many different things, kind of getting cohesion about, you know, are we, you know, not, are we batshit crazy or not? And I think the consensus is that no, we are not batshit crazy, that we are probably more likely directly over the target. And look forward to talking to you again soon at any time, Brett, and any of your friends are welcome on this platform too. This is why we do this. So thanks again so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
All right, guys. I hope you guys got as much out of that and had as much fun as I did with that. Just before we let you guys go, I want to bring up his Substack again. You'll find it recommended over on my Substack, but Substack seems to be the place where all of the cool kids go. And if you want the best of the best, that's where we seem to be regrouping and gathering. So that's it for tonight, folks. Tomorrow, like I said, we're going to do something kind of to hopefully convince our Facebook family to relocate as part of the prepping of alternative thought. So that's what we'll look at tomorrow. And on that note, this is what all of the partners that we have with our platform, not many, but the 3 that we do have, is all about being prepared. So I love you guys all. Stay mighty, my friends, family, patriots, prisoners, and hostages. We will see you same time, same place tomorrow.